The girl's small shoulders shook as the motorcycles rumbled across the cracked pavement. The bullies were waiting by the fence, arms crossed, grinning like it was any other morning. Only this time, the sound was different. It swallowed the air, wiped out the jeers, replaced every laugh with vibrating steel. Adults on the corner glanced over but didn't step forward. One woman filmed on her phone, muttering about how it must be a stunt. The child's knees trembled. Her backpack hung halfway open. Yet she didn't move. The nearest biker turned, squinting under his sunglasses. He wasn't used to kids standing that close. Behind him, the engines echoed like thunder down the block, layered and heavy, shaking the ground more than the bullies ever could. No one spoke. For a moment, only the sound lived. Then her voice cracked through it, thin, frightened, but steady. "Can you walk me to school?" Grant Holloway froze. The street went silent. Even the engine seemed to wait for his answer. A week earlier, Lila Carter sat in the principal's office while her mother pleaded for help. Across the desk, polite nods came with phrases that meant nothing. "We'll look into it, kids can be cruel." The room smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. Lila traced a tiny scratch on her knee, one of many. Out the window, the boys were laughing again, throwing erasers, shoving each other near the chain fence. After school, she took the long route home, clutching her backpack tighter when footsteps followed. A stone hit her shoe, another skimmed her shoulder. She didn't cry, just ran. That night, her mother sat at the table, phone pressed to her ear. Another worker, another empty promise. Lila stared at the refrigerator's hum, listening to hope fade with every word her mother couldn't change. The phone buzzed again. A short message glowed on the screen, "We'll handle it internally." No one ever did. The next morning came gray and cold. Lila changed her route again, walking behind the small grocery instead of down the main street. She hoped the older kids wouldn't notice. They noticed. Footsteps trailed her, quick and mocking. Someone kicked an empty soda can that bounced against her heel. A voice called her name in a sing-song tone that made her heart jump. She squeezed her backpack tight and slipped through a narrow passage between fences, dust from the alley scraping her knees. At home that afternoon, a social worker stopped by with forms and half-sincere smiles. "It's just teasing," she said gently. "Things like this pass." Lila stayed quiet, tracing circles on her jeans. She knew the woman had already packed up her pen before listening. Her mother faced the window while talking, throat tight, eyes wet. She didn't notice her daughter watching. Later, Lila sat on the porch alone. Down the block, she heard a low mechanical growl, steady, rhythmic. Motorcycles idling by the gas station. For the first time, that sound didn't scare her. It sounded like strength. It took all her courage to cross that street. 3 engines rumbled, chrome catching the morning sun, their riders halfway through coffee and small talk. Lila's shoes scuffed the curb, her heart pounding so fast it hurt. Grant Holloway turned as she approached. He saw the scuffed backpack, the mark on her arm, and the fear she tried to hide. The other riders went quiet, their helmets hanging from the handlebars like eyes watching it unfold. She stopped a few steps away. Her voice broke halfway through the first word, yet she managed to breathe it out. "Can you walk me to school?" The biggest rider tilted his head. "What's that?" She said it again, louder this time, but tears ran anyway. At the corner, the same group of boys stared, restless and waiting. The silence between those two worlds, machines and fear, felt endless. Grant crouched to meet her eyes. "Why us?" he asked. "Because nobody else listens," she said. The air trembled, the engine seemed louder now, almost answering for him. Grant looked back at his men. None of them spoke, but one nodded. Then another. He stood, lifted his helmet, and started his engine. The child flinched, but didn't look away. That night, the group called a meeting at Grant's shop. Grease-stained floors, half-fixed engines, the smell of burnt metal. It wasn't meant for planning protests, but that's what it became. Phones rang, messages flew, riders from outside the city offered to join. Across town, rumors fluttered like sparks. Some parents said it was reckless. Others said it was brave. The school district sent an email warning about outside interference. Lila's mother read it aloud, her voice filled with both alarm and relief. The next dawn, an unfamiliar thunder rolled through the neighborhood. Dozens of bikes lined the street, their headlights cutting through the morning fog. Lila stepped forward, helmet loose on her head, Grant beside her. The boys at the fence froze. The teachers by the entrance whispered hurriedly into phones. The engines started together, a deep, united roar that carried over rooftops. As they moved, neighbors peeked through curtains, cameras up, mouths open. By the time Lila reached the gate, the crowd waiting wasn't mocking. It was quiet. Unsure. Moved. But up on the steps, a man in a pressed shirt lifted his phone. "You can't be here," he warned. "This won't end well." Grant didn't slow down. By noon, the clips had already spread online, Lila's pink helmet, the convoy of roaring motorcycles surrounding her on the way to school. TV hosts debated it. Some called it inspiring. Others said it crossed a line. In the hallways, students replayed the footage on their phones while teachers whispered near the bulletin boards. The principal issued a warning that outside groups should stay away. Still, that morning, kids pressed against classroom windows just to catch a glimpse when the engines passed again. A reporter waited outside the school gate, shouting questions at whoever would answer. Parents argued in the parking lot, some raising their voices, others afraid to be seen defending the bikers. Grant's name started trending locally, along with calls for an investigation. Nobody mentioned how all this began. A small girl who simply asked for safety. That night, silence filled the Carter kitchen until a heavy knock echoed through the house. Lila's mother opened the door to find an officer on the step. His tone was polite, but his eyes held warning. "There've been concerns," he said. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" Lila watched silently from the hallway, gripping the edge of the wall until her knuckles went white. The next morning, Child Protective Services showed up. Two workers in gray coats stood at the doorway, clipboards ready. "We received reports about unusual influences," one began. The words were practiced, but the message was clear: someone wanted trouble shifted elsewhere. Her mother stood frozen, explaining between tears that she worked double shifts, begged for help, but the school hadn't listened. One of the workers just nodded, pretending to take notes, while the other scanned the living room like an investigator. Meanwhile, Grant's garage phone rang non-stop. A local business had dropped his service contract. An email from a city board member accused the group of public disruption. Flyers appeared downtown calling the bikers unsafe. That evening, the Brotherhood met in a dim warehouse. The air smelled like oil and frustration. Some wanted to back off, others demanded they ride again tomorrow. Fear mixed with determination. Grant listened silently until the chatter stopped. Then he spoke, voice low but steady. "We started because one kid was terrified to go to class. If we stop now, how do we explain that to her?" The men looked at each other, uneasy but united. A phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. A message popped up: "You should see this." Grant opened the link. The video began shaky, filmed through a small school window. Lila was walking down the hallway when a boy shoved her so hard she stumbled into a locker. Off camera, laughter followed. A man's voice said, "Kids have to learn somehow." Within an hour, the clip was everywhere. Students shared it. Parents raged in comment sections. Morning anchors debated whether the school knew. The district held a press briefing the next day, reading carefully worded lines about their commitment to safety. Grant stood among the reporters outside, helmet under his arm, watching officials dodge real questions. That night, at the Carter home, television lights flickered across Lila's face as adults argued on the screen about whether the video was out of context. She turned it off quietly and covered her ears. Outside, engines echoed faintly in the distance. The Brotherhood was meeting again. Grant's phone beeped with a new message, an encrypted file, no name attached. Inside, pages of complaints stretched on and on, ignored reports, dismissed incidents, messages from parents begging for help. At the bottom was one final entry, time-stamped a week earlier, another student hurt. Told principal. No callback. Grant stared at it until the room blurred around him. He knew now, it wasn't just about Lila anymore. The air was heavy that morning. Grant printed every page from the file and spread them across his counter. The paperwork felt endless, evidence swallowed by bureaucracy. He called for a ride, not just a gathering. This time it had a name, the Ride for Respect. Word spread fast. Bikers from nearby towns joined in, engines rolling through Dayton streets in waves. Parents began walking beside them, some carried cardboard signs with children's names. Others watched from behind blinds, afraid but curious. Police cars appeared at intersections, officers waving people back toward sidewalks. Someone shouted through a megaphone for permits. Nobody budged. Onlookers raised phones. The roar grew into rhythm, a heartbeat made of engines and anger. At City Hall, the line of bikers stretched around the square. They parked in rows, dismounted, and stood silent as church bells rang across the city. Cameras flashed like lightning. Inside, officials gathered behind locked doors. Outside, Grant stepped forward to address the crowd. No more ignored calls. No more silence, he said, voice carried by microphones and open hearts. Suddenly, tire screeches cut through the chant. A cruiser accelerated from the cross street, aiming straight toward the formation. Engines revved back in unison. Boots hit pavement. No one moved an inch. Silence gripped the square, thick and waiting. The cruiser braked inches away from the front row. The officer inside lowered his head, radio crackling with confused orders. Dozens of riders stood motionless, the morning light bouncing off their jackets like armor. Grant stepped forward. "We're not here to fight," he said. "We're here because a child asked for help and no one listened." His words carried through amplifiers downtown. The crowd erupted, not with violence, but applause. From windows above, teachers and parents watched. Some began to weep. Back at home, Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, watching on live TV. Her helmet rested beside her. Her mother wiped her eyes and whispered, "They're doing this for you." Police eventually formed a loose perimeter, but tension held. The bikers didn't flinch. Behind them, young riders raised signs that read, "Let the kids be heard." Grant's phone buzzed again, another statement from the state office flashing across the screen. It dismissed the footage entirely, calling it misinterpreted. The crowd roared with disbelief. Grant raised his arm for quiet. "If the system won't protect our kids," he said slowly, "then the community will." The roar that followed was deafening, part defiance, part relief. And in that sound, something shifted. The town had crossed from silence into revolt. Within days, investigations began, but not against the school. Officials ordered background checks on the bikers, claiming it was procedure. News outlets echoed the story without questioning why. Grant's shop phone rang non-stop, reporters pushing for comment he refused to give. At home, Lila's mother opened a government envelope labeled "Child Safety Concern." The words blurred as she read that her case would be under review. It was the system's way of shifting blame onto the very people it had failed. Neighbors grew cautious. Some stopped waving from porches. Others whispered that things had gone too far. Inside the Brotherhood's meeting hall, Grant slammed a fist on the table. "They're punishing the wrong side," he said. The men nodded, silent and boiling. Then came a lead, a local reporter who wanted to expose everything, the videos, the records, the cover-ups. But before publishing, she said, she needed proof that one final document existed, a hidden complaint buried inside district files. Grant's reply was immediate. "Tell me where to find it." Outside, storm clouds gathered. The movement spread faster than anyone expected. Parents gathered in church basements, corner diners, and school gyms. Old fears turned into confessions. Mothers stood and told their stories, fathers unfolded letters they'd written but never sent. Grant traveled from meeting to meeting, collecting testimonies handwritten on napkins and scrap paper. He boxed them carefully, labeling each one, "unheard." Camera crews followed, searching for sound bites. Some reporters twisted the message, others showed genuine emotion. Hate mail piled up on Grant's counter, anonymous notes saying he'd ruined Dayton's image. Still, the bikers kept recording, posting updates, showing calm instead of anger. One evening, Grant found Lila outside, drawing chalk hearts on the sidewalk. "They're still trying to stop us," he told her. She looked up, steady and small. "Then you keep going." That night, another message came through on the Brotherhood site. The State Education Board had announced a special hearing to review the district's failures. It was the chance they'd been waiting for, and the risk that could finish them. The civic hall overflowed. Parents stood shoulder to shoulder, reporters lining every wall. Grant, in a plain jacket, sat near Lila's mother. They spoke few words, just a nod of courage shared between them. When the session began, officials recited policies while dodging substance. Cameras rolled as audience members whispered their disbelief. Then the lights dimmed for a short video presentation. Lila's recorded testimony filled the screen. Her voice was calm but trembled at the edges. "I just wanted to feel safe going to school." Something shifted. The silence that followed broke under quiet sobs. Teachers covered their mouths, parents stood up spontaneously. The chairman tried to regain control, but the pressure was too high. Midway through the proceeding, the principal rose shakily. Without a word, he placed his resignation on the podium and walked out. Applause thundered. Reporters scrambled. Grant stayed seated, hands clasped tight, knowing this was only part of the truth breaking loose. Outside the building, the crowd merged with the Brotherhood. Engines rumbled as chants turned to cheers. Cameras caught teachers linking arms with bikers, parents carrying handmade signs. Grant climbed onto his bike, lifting his helmet toward the crowd. One by one, the riders followed, engines starting like rolling thunder across downtown. At the center, Lila sat with her mother behind her, holding tight. Her small hand waved at the other kids lining the sidewalks, many wearing paper helmets made in class that morning. Up ahead, the sound grew louder, an escort, not a protest. Police units cleared intersections, drivers honked in rhythm, strangers saluted from porches and rooftops. A banner stretched above the school gate, "Every child protected." The words fluttered in the wind as sunlight hit the chrome rose. For the first time, no one shouted them off school property. And for the first time, fear wasn't the loudest sound. Engines carried hope instead. Months passed. Winter melted from Dayton streets, leaving softer mornings and quieter corners. The old fence still stood by the schoolyard, but it no longer carried dread. Lila walked there again, alone, confident, humming beneath her breath. The cracked sidewalk had weeds growing through it now, gentle reminders that even broken ground can bloom. Passing the gate, she turned to wave at a passing rider. He honked once and vanished down the hill with the others in formation. Inside classrooms, posters about empathy and accountability hung where silence once ruled. In her backpack was a small metal pin shaped like a wheel, the Brotherhood's emblem. She rubbed it once for luck and smiled. That morning news crews aired her final words from an interview, "I just asked for help, and they showed up." The city listened as engines roared faintly through the afternoon distance. That sound, steady, protective, never really left. It became the pulse of a promise kept. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Every share, every comment, and every voice help stories like Lila's reach someone who needs courage today. Would you have stepped forward if you saw what she faced? Tell us in the comments. Tap the like button if you believe no child should ever walk in fear. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next real-life story that can open hearts and change communities. Let's make sure silence never wins again.